Perfect. All right. So today I just want to review kind of just the Zentangle process with you guys, just in case you forgot, show you some lines, and then kind of talk about the process specifically in terms of the animal itself, right? So there are some of you that haven't had Zentangle before. This might be a kind of a new concept to you, so this is good as well. So for those of you that didn't do it, in Intro to Art, what I kind of teach you right away with Zentangle is how to do like a ribbon design. Now, this ribbon design isn't something that's required for anything, but it is kind of a cool way just to show you how you can weave lines together. So the way that this technique works is you just do like a curved line like that. And then all you do is you follow next to that curved line and you just pick points to have it touch. So what I do is on like the deep crevices here, I'll make it touch. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start next to it a little bit, just pick a gap, and I'm going to follow my line. I'm going to touch at the crevices, and then I'm going to have it jut back out again, and I'll have it touch at this point, and then it will kind of jump back out again. And basically, if you just keep layering these, it's going to look kind of like a 3D ribbon. So to me, if I'm doing a Zentangle and I maybe don't know what to do, if you want like just kind of a smooth, wavy look, this is a technique that you can always pull out and try, right? The thing with Zentangle too is it usually doesn't look good right away. Like you have to make a lot of lines. The more lines you add, the better it's going to look. And even if you make a mistake somewhere, in the grand scheme of things, the idea is you should have so many lines that whoever's looking at it is just going to get so overwhelmed and impressed with the amount of lines that they're not going to notice every little mistake. So it is good for this animal one, though. I do want you practicing a lot beforehand and really planning out. So that's why I have online and physically, I have this here just to give you ideas for patterns you can try, right? So then the idea with your animal is, you've got really large chunks of space, right? So maybe you decide that you want to break it up in some way. It could be straight lines, could be curved lines. You might pick a pattern based on something, but then now, like within this small space, I could decide that I want to do another pattern here. And remember, think of Zentangle as just like doodling, line patterns, things like that. The difference this year in drawing class as opposed to intro to art is that it's going to be planned ahead of time. We're not going to be as random with it. You might be random in your brainstorming, and then you might find something that you like, and then maybe in here these are all going to have dots. Then maybe these ones are going to have like a different pattern. Then maybe this is going to do something different here. I mean, you could do all kinds of crazy things, but eventually it kind of all fills out the space, right? So once again, there's really no like wrong way to do it as long as you're filling with a lot of line and a lot of pattern and you're doing it in a way that makes sense. And just remember, the more lines you make, the darker the section is going to be, and the less lines, the lighter. So you can think about value a little bit, right? So I'm going to pull out an example here. Let me just adjust the camera up a little bit. All right, so we'll do something like this here. All right, so here's my animal outline, right? And this is where some of you are going to be at right now. If you haven't done this yet, you would either draw the outline yourself, or you could, once again, trace with the light table off of a print, which is fine. So what I would do with maybe pencil first is decide how you want to break this up. Because you can see I have some really big, large chunks of space here that I might not know what to do with. But you can use the natural contours of the animal, right? So I see like this line was already here. So I could just continue that line out, and then that could be a nice breaking point for that. And I can kind of seal this section off. Now this section I could decide to do all one pattern, or I might decide to break that up even more, right? Any of these lines that I could just kind of continue to the end, I might do that. This line on the top here, maybe I continue that out as well. And then it's going to be a little bit more abstract like shapes. And maybe I do something like this and I round that off. Just so to break it up, because then in here within this eye, I could break in all these little rings into different patterns, right? Down here on the wing, I might take this and I might just imagine where the bottom of this might be, and I might do something like this. So once again, you could continue to break up that way. I know this here is like a tail feather, right? So maybe I want to break this up and I want to just do like a bunch of straight lines, something like that. So once you kind of have it all initially broken up and you've kind of figured out where you want all the shapes to go, make sure it's in an area where you're comfortable with how small the areas are. Then on a separate sheet, I would be planning out your textures, your designs. Something I mentioned is on your actual printout, you could actually draw Zentangle lines over your printout to kind of like fit them in the areas and see how it goes. So for example, down here on the wing, let's say I planned it out and I want to give the effect that maybe it's still going to look like a feather, but it's going to be a Zentangle pattern. So maybe my pattern is going to be something like this, where I kind of do these like big teardrop shapes. So maybe I'm going to do these big teardrop shapes, and I'm going to make a pattern of those. And here's the thing, depending on your comfort level, it is a lot of work, but if you want to have more freedom to like make mistakes, you could do your whole Zentangle with pencil, but then you'd have to retrace it with pen. If you're comfortable and like you're confident in your idea, you can just go in with pen right away when you start doing the actual Zentangle part, right? So let me just kind of get this pattern like started. I'm not going to do the whole thing, right? But let's say we start off something like this, just as an example, and it kind of looks like feathers already. But now within each of those quote unquote feather shapes that I've made, now maybe I want to do some more Zentangle lines. So maybe I just want to do something that's kind of like the ribbon, but I might just pick a point here and just extend out and kind of create a pattern this way. And I might try to round it and make it actually look a little bit rounded. I might curve my lines a little bit. So I might do something like that. And if I like that, I could just continue that for all the other ones. Or I could make a pattern and do something different within each one. But the whole idea now is we're breaking it into smaller and smaller sections, and then you just really focus in on these smaller areas and just go really intense with your Zentangle patterns. So maybe I do the whole row like this, then maybe the next row I do something different. And maybe in the next row I do want to do something more with like circles and just completely change the pattern. And I could maybe reverse that and keep going. This is why you'd want to plan it out ahead of time. Right now, I'm kind of just going off the top of my head. So if I went and I did the circle pattern and I decided I don't like it, well, I'm kind of stuck with it and I've got to work with it, right? So let's say we do something like this, okay, and we do something like that. Okay, and we just fill that in with circles. So that could be another idea there. And then maybe I alternate once again or keep doing the same thing, whatever. Once again, early on, it's not going to look very impressive, but as you start to fill it out and really think about it, it's going to look better. Now, value is really important to think about where do you want it lighter, where do you want it darker. So like up here, if I decide that I want these feathers darker, I would just simply go in and add more lines. So maybe I do something like this where I add more straight lines and I just kind of cut them in half and fill in between. That's going to make it a little bit darker. So now you can see how this feather is starting to look darker than this one. Otherwise, I could do something where maybe I just do like a different type of pattern in between. So maybe I do something like this. So this is where the brainstorming is really going to come in handy, because this is where you're going to like really get initial ideas and then plan it out. So like I've done 3 different feather patterns here, and I just did it kind of on a whim. But realistically, I would have done this on a separate page and kind of thought about it and planned it, right? The other thing that you can do, and we didn't do this in Intro to Art, is we could actually incorporate a little bit of pencil shading. So let's say I do want these feathers to look kind of 3D. I could go in here and I could actually add maybe some value underneath these ones on top, and I could even use like a blending stub and blend it in over the top, and we could actually add some value in. So this will look cooler. Like I'm trying to do it in this area because this area has more Zentangle, but it looks really cool when the Zentangle's there. But then I could take my blending stick, which we have some of that stuff up here, and I could push this out and kind of blend it and give it even more value that way. So you can kind of do something a little bit with some pencil shading on there as well, like mixed in over the Zentangle, and you can kind of do something cool like that. So here I'll just kind of zoom in a little bit so you guys can see that. But just doing something like that, and then it will make it look more 3D, like the Zentangle shapes are actually laying on top of each other, and it gives it more dimension. So once again, nothing I've showed you here is required. You kind of determine how it is, but your end goal, as we saw from the examples, posted in Google Classroom, is I really want this animal really filled out and saturated. Areas that you leave lighter, you want to pick and choose just maybe a few here and there, but for the most part, it's very filled. This outer background here can just be left white. If you want to add some Zentangle back there, you can, okay? So I'm going to stop recording the video here. I think that should be pretty solid for that.